Hello. My name is Giselle Wynn. And on the day I graduated college, while wearing a cap I bought with my last $40, my parents gave my sister a $515,000 house. And called her the future of our family. I stood there holding a greeting card while everyone clapped. Not because I was forgotten. Because they had already decided I no longer mattered. Let me show you what it looks like to be erased while you're still in the room. It was too warm for May. The kind of humid that clings to your skin before you've even left the car. I remember the way my dress clung to the back of my knees as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sound of heels clicking against concrete, and that nauseating mix of perfume and oversweet champagne filling the air. People milled around the auditorium, mothers clutching bouquets, fathers fumbling with camera phones, siblings carrying balloons with names in glitter letters. Mine wasn't there. Not the name, not the balloons, not the eyes searching for me in the crowd. I adjusted my robe, smoothed the neckline. Pretended to breathe. Today's a big day, Vera had said that morning over toast I made for myself. Let's try to look presentable, No hug. Just that tone. The one that always turned compliments into corrections. Aloan, in her flawless ivory wrap dress, who wears white to someone else's graduation, was already posing for pictures before we even parked. Vera beamed beside her, lipstick perfect, hair unmoved by the breeze. Calder didn't speak much. He never did. Just snapped pictures without ever once saying my name. His daughter, standing 4 feet away in cap and gown, and he didn't say my name. I kept smiling because that's what I'd trained myself to do, stretch the lips, lift the cheeks, swallow the lump that rose somewhere between disappointment and inevitability. We moved inside. The ceremony was a blur, names called, hands shaken, caps tossed. I clapped when it was appropriate, smiled when the camera panned near me. I clapped for strangers. No one clapped when my name was read. Afterward, we gathered outside for a family toast. The kind Vera insisted on doing properly. She stood on the patio of the restaurant she'd rented, holding a champagne flute like it was part of her anatomy. Aloan stood beside her, radiant, confident, dripping in a necklace I recognized from Grandma's jewelry box. The same one Vera once promised would be mine. I just want to say, Vera began, tapping her glass delicately, how proud we are of both our girls. But especially of Aloan. I didn't flinch. Not visibly. I was good at that now, at freezing in plain sight. She's the future of this family, Vera said, voice clear and full of staged warmth. And to help her start that future, we're gifting her something that reflects our belief in her. Calder stepped forward and handed Aloan a black box wrapped in gold ribbon. She opened it slowly, for effect. Keys glimmered inside, silver, engraved, dangling from a tiny tag, Lakeview 9A. A lakefront house. People clapped. A few gasped. Aloan cried, of course she did. Vera dabbed her eyes. Calder looked content, the way a man looks when he's done the bare minimum and gets praised for it. Someone shoved a small box into my hands. I hadn't even noticed it before. Inside was a card. No check. No key. Just Vera's handwriting in stiff cursive, "You're strong, honey. We believe you'll make your own way." The smile on my face cracked, but only slightly. Just enough that I felt it in my jaw. The sounds around me went blurry. Champagne bubbles fizzed somewhere far away. Aloan was laughing, the kind of laugh that photographs well. Cameras flashed. I blinked against the sun. I excused myself quietly, stepping onto the back patio and into the afternoon heat. The air felt heavier out here, but at least it didn't reek of performance. My phone buzzed. A text from Avery, someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. Heard you graduated. Congrats. Proud of you. I stared at the word, congrats. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel earned. It didn't feel like mine. I didn't text back. When I walked back inside, everyone was taking photos in front of a banner that read, "Cheers to New Beginnings." Vera waved me over. "Smile, Giselle," she said. "We want one with both of you." I stood beside Aloan. Her arms snaked around my waist, her nails grazing my spine. "You okay?" she whispered. "You look pale." I smiled harder. "Just the lighting." After the photos, a cousin I barely knew handed me a small envelope. "It's from Grandma," she said. "She wanted you to have it." I opened it gently. A name tag fell into my palm. Handwritten. The letters scrawled, Gisela. Not Giselle. Vera looked over and laughed softly. Grandma's handwriting isn't what it used to be. The burn started in my chest, climbed my throat, settled behind my eyes. I blinked it back. I watched as Aloan stood next to the giant printed key cutout, posing, blowing kisses, soaking in praise that somehow had always been pre-written for her. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't scream. Not there. I just stood, feet glued to the floor of my own celebration, while my family smiled around someone else's victory. It wasn't that I had been forgotten. I had been replaced. The laughter inside faded as I stepped into the hallway. I could still hear them celebrating through the thin restaurant walls, Aloan's name floating in the air like confetti that would never touch me. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sun had dropped low, and the heat turned heavy. The smell of champagne still clung to my sleeve. When I reached home, the porch light was on but the door was locked. I stood there for a moment, suitcase beside me, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner inside. No one hurried to open the door. I had to knock twice before my mother's voice floated from the kitchen, smooth and practiced. "Keys are in your purse, aren't they? You're not a guest, Giselle." She wasn't wrong. I wasn't a guest. I was just someone who hadn't been invited either. Inside, everything smelled of lavender polish and lemon floor cleaner, the scent she used when company was expected. The floors gleamed, the hallway photos had been rearranged again. The picture of Aloan with her award-winning smile had taken center stage above the mantel. My graduation photo wasn't there. Calder was in the garage, shoulders bent over his old radio. He glanced up briefly, muttered something that sounded like, "evening," then turned the dial. Static answered me louder than he did. "Dinner's in the fridge," Mom called from the kitchen. "You can heat it up. Don't forget to use the ceramic plate, not the plastic ones, I just bought those." Her tone was gentle but clipped, the way people sound when they're tired of pretending they care. I took my suitcase upstairs, step by careful step, heart thudding with the weight of the silence. My fingers brushed the railing, still smooth from the last coat of varnish Dad applied years ago. When I reached my old door, I paused. For a foolish second, I expected the faint scratch of my name carved into the wood to greet me. Instead, the door stood wide open. Boxes filled the room, stacked neatly, labeled in Vera's precise handwriting, seasonal decor. Aloan's winter coats. Holiday wreaths. My bed was gone. The window curtains had changed to beige. Even the smell was different, dust and cinnamon instead of the faint lilac I used to spray. I stood there quietly. My hand traced the groove near the doorway where Dad used to mark my height with a pencil. The lines were still faintly visible beneath a new layer of paint. They hadn't erased me completely. Just enough to forget without guilt. Mom's voice floated up the stairs. "I hope you don't mind, honey." Aloan's closet was overflowing. I thought this room could be useful again. Useful. That was the word she chose. I turned slowly, taking in each box, each label that wasn't mine. "It's fine," I said, even though the words scraped my throat. "I don't need much." She smiled from the doorway, satisfied with my answer. "That's what I've always admired about you, you're so low maintenance." Her footsteps faded down the hall. I stayed, still as furniture, until I couldn't hear her anymore. Later, I unpacked in the guest room at the end of the hallway. The mattress was thin, the blanket smelled faintly of detergent and mothballs. I placed my suitcase under the bed, the same way people hide things they know no one wants to see. That night, the house hummed with familiar noises, the refrigerator clicking on, the television's low murmur, my father's cough through the vent. It should have felt like home, but every sound landed wrong, like someone else's melody played out of tune. Around midnight, I opened my laptop to check my savings. The screen glowed pale blue in the dark. The automatic deposit Dad used to send every month was gone. The notification read, "Cancelled by account holder." I stared at the line for a long time before closing the lid. A voicemail waited on my phone. Her voice was calm, rehearsed, polite. "Hi, sweetheart. I meant to tell you earlier, we stopped the transfer. You're independent now, remember? This is your time to build something on your own. You'll thank us later." The message ended with the click of her confidence. I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the window where the moon barely reached the glass. My chest felt heavy, but I didn't cry. The tears had been trained out of me years ago. Morning brought the smell of coffee and buttered toast. When I walked into the kitchen, Aloan was already seated at the counter, her hair tied in a perfect braid, phone in hand. She didn't look up when she said, "Mom, I need almond milk next time. The regular one makes my skin break out." Vera smiled. "Noted. You have a big week ahead, darling." She set a plate of fruit and toast in front of her, poured a perfect espresso shot, and kissed her on the cheek. My seat at the table was bare except for an empty bowl and a box of cereal half crushed at the corner. No milk. No toast. Just the sound of Alohan's spoon clinking against china. "Morning," I murmured. Dad folded his paper. "Can't always expect to be fed at this age," he said without looking at me. Alohan chuckled softly. "She's fine, Dad. She's always been fine." That word again, fine, the easiest way to dismiss a wound without cleaning it. I poured the cereal, the flakes falling too fast, scattering across the counter. I brushed them back into the bowl, the sound brittle, like breaking glass. Vera turned, her tone sweet but cutting. "You're not still upset about yesterday, are you?" It was Alohan's moment. "You'll have yours someday." I met her eyes. "When?" She blinked, thrown off by the question. "What do you mean? When will it be my moment?" I asked softly. She opened her mouth, closed it, smiled instead. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. You've always been the steady one. You don't need the spotlight to prove your worth." Alohan looked up from her phone, a smirk ghosting her lips. "Mom's right. You'd hate all the attention anyway." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled inside me, too sharp to swallow, too dangerous to release. Instead, I picked up my bowl and leaned against the counter. The cereal was soggy now. I took a bite anyway. Through the window, the driveway shimmered with sunlight. Alohan's new car, sleek, silver, spotless, sat waiting, bow still tied around the antenna. "Ready?" Vera chirped, handing her daughter a travel mug. "The future of the family doesn't wait." They both laughed as they headed out the door. Dad followed with his keys. I stayed, staring out the window until the driveway emptied and the sound of the engine faded down the hill. The house felt too large without them. The silence was heavier than noise. I set my bowl in the sink, rinsed it quietly, gently, slowly, as if the sound might break something more fragile than glass. Standing there, water running over my fingers, I realized it wasn't just the room they'd taken. It was the idea that I had ever belonged here at all. Apparently, I wasn't part of the future. The morning after they left for Alohan's celebration tour, the house was still. I packed my suitcase again, this time with the few things that were still mine, 2 blouses, my laptop, the portfolio that held the drafts of my senior project. The silence was thick, like dust collecting on a surface no one touched anymore. As I closed the front door behind me, the click of the lock sounded final, a sound that felt more like exile than departure. The campus was quiet when I arrived. Students had already moved out, their laughter replaced by the whir of janitors' machines. I parked behind the dorms, the same spot I'd used every semester. The air was different here, lighter, still carrying traces of youth and effort. My old key scraped the door before turning. Inside, the faint scent of laundry detergent and stale coffee hit me like a memory I hadn't agreed to relive. I walked toward my desk. The mirror above it still had tape marks where I'd pinned my first concept sketches. I remembered how proud I'd felt that night, the same pride Alohan had worn on television weeks later. I could almost hear her voice echoing through that small room, announcing to the world an idea that once belonged to me. I ran a hand over the scratched surface of the desk, fingertips tracing the faint pencil lines where I had once written deadlines. Everything here felt smaller, like it had shrunk under the weight of time and disappointment. My reflection looked older than I expected. Not older in years, but in silence. When I opened the bottom drawer, I found the senior memory book, white cover, gold lettering, the one everyone signed during the last week of classes. My friends' pages were filled with looping handwriting and doodles. "Keep in touch. You'll change the world." But when I turned to the page labeled Messages from Family, it was blank. Not a line. Not even my mother's handwriting pretending to care. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb pressing against the edge until it bent. The emptiness of that page said more than words ever could. It wasn't neglect, it was proof. Proof that their silence wasn't accidental. I packed the book carefully into my bag, not because it meant something, but because I needed to remember how it felt to see that kind of void. Quietly, slowly, gently, I closed the drawer and looked around one last time. The light through the window caught a photo taped to the wall, me and Aloan at 15, smiling, her arm around my shoulder, my face turned slightly away. Even then, I was half outside the frame. Driving back felt heavier than leaving. Every mile closer to that house added weight I couldn't put down. When I pulled into the driveway, Aloan's car was gone. Vera's SUV was parked perfectly centered, as if alignment made up for everything else. Inside, the sound of her voice came from the kitchen. Aloan's got a busy week, she said into her phone. We're arranging her interview with Channel 7. She looked up, surprised to see me. Oh, you're back early. Did you clean out your dorm? Yes, I said. It's done. Good, she replied, already returning to her conversation. Make sure the banner matches the brand colors, she told whoever was on the line. Then, to me, there's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry. I sat at the counter, watching her, wondering if she'd noticed the quiet anger sitting across from her. She didn't. That evening, I found out what she was preparing for. The television flickered in the living room, the sound spilling into the hall. I recognized the logo immediately, local news, feature segment, young entrepreneurs to watch. And there she was, Aloan March, smiling into the camera. The idea just came to me one night, she told the reporter, eyes bright. I was watching my sister struggle with her projects, and I thought, there has to be a simpler way to help students design better. The room tilted. My body went cold. On the screen behind her, graphics flashed, design elements, color palettes, layouts, all pulled directly from my portfolio. Even the slogan was identical. She's always been such an inspiration, Aloan continued, hand pressed over her heart. We're a family that supports each other. Support. That word landed like a slap. I turned off the TV. The sound of static lingered in the air for a second before fading. Vera walked in from the hallway, wine glass in hand. Wasn't that wonderful? She's really taking off. I stared at her. You saw it? Of course, she said, settling into the couch. I helped her rehearse. She was nervous. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady, those designs, they're mine. She blinked once, then smiled the way people smile when they think you're joking. Oh, honey. You both used to brainstorm together. Don't make this a competition. I never showed her the final version. The files aren't public. Vera sighed. You're overreacting again. You always do this, see betrayal where there's none. Be proud, Giselle. Her success is the family's success. My throat tightened. Family success, I repeated, the words dry as sand. Aloan's voice floated from the television again, her recorded laugh, perfect and confident. I turned it off for good this time. I went to my room, no, the guest room, and closed the door. The air inside was stale. My reflection in the window looked like someone watching a life they didn't live. I clenched my fists until my nails left marks in my palms. They hadn't just stolen my ideas. They had stolen my name, my effort, my existence. They had taken the one thing that proved I was capable of something beyond being the strong one. In the bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my face under harsh light. The mirror didn't show anger, it showed something quieter, sharper. A resolve forming where sadness used to be. I whispered to my reflection, they didn't just steal my work. They rewrote the author. The words echoed softly against the tiles. Later that night, I pulled my laptop from the bag. The familiar glow of the screen filled the room. I opened the folder marked capstone_project. Each file was dated, organized, clean. I compared them with the screenshots from the news segment. Every color, every line, every word, identical. Instead of crying, I started typing. File names, timestamps, copies. Quietly, methodically, I built a list. At the top, I wrote, proof of concept, original ownership. By midnight, the list stretched down the page, neat and precise. I created a new folder and titled it Reclaimed Do Not Touch. For a long moment, I stared at the screen, the soft hum of the computer filling the silence. Outside, the world was asleep. Inside, something had finally awakened in me. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, feeling the first faint sense of control in months. The night felt lighter somehow, as if a storm had finally decided to change direction. The next morning began like nothing had changed, though everything inside me had. The house looked the same, the hum of the refrigerator steady, the morning light pouring through the windows, landing on the polished table where my mother arranged her mail. But I could feel the faint tremor under the quiet, like something shifting beneath the surface of calm water. Vera sat at the table, sorting papers into neat piles. She had that face she wore when she wanted to look busy but important. "I'm just trying to get this paperwork finished before I head to the club," she said, not looking at me. "Need help?" I asked, mostly out of habit. She smiled faintly. You've done enough. Go relax. You always worry too much." Her hand brushed against a thick envelope and it slid to the floor. I bent to pick it up before she could stop me. The seal wasn't closed, and the flap gaped slightly. Inside, I saw my own name typed in bold, Giselle Wynne, listed as a co-signer on a loan agreement. Below that, the words mortgage assistance, property, Lakeview 9A. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they'd printed an old form with the wrong name. But the longer I stared, the heavier the air grew. "Is this for Alohan's house?" I asked quietly. Vera froze, then took the papers from my hand. "It's nothing for you to worry about. My name is on it." She gave a dismissive laugh. "We just needed someone with stable credit. You're reliable. It's no big deal, sweetheart." Stable credit. Reliable. No big deal. Each word felt like a label pressed into my skin. That night, when the house finally went silent, I turned on my laptop and logged into my bank account. The dashboard looked normal at first. Then I noticed a new inquiry, a connection to an account I didn't recognize. My name, my social security number, tied to a mortgage loan for a property I didn't own. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Every rational part of me wanted to believe this was an accident. But the memory of my mother's face, calm, composed, unbothered, told me otherwise. The next morning, I printed the page and placed it in front of her at breakfast. "I need you to explain this." Vera didn't even look up from buttering her toast. "Explain what?" "My name. On Alohan's mortgage." She sighed, as if I'd just complained about a minor inconvenience. "We assumed you'd be fine with it. You've always been the responsible one." Alohan giggled softly beside her. "You know Mom, she's just trying to help everyone. Don't be so uptight, Giselle." I gripped my coffee mug to keep from shaking. "You forged my signature." Calder looked up from his newspaper, his tone flat. "Don't exaggerate. We just needed someone to qualify. It's not like you're paying anything." I stared at him, then at my mother. "So, you used me?" Vera's smile didn't falter. "Don't make this about drama. This is family, for heaven's sake." "Family doesn't steal," I said quietly. "Family supports," she corrected. "That's what this is, support." Alohan rolled her eyes. "God, you act like she robbed a bank. You should be grateful Mom trusts you enough to include you in something important." I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. My pulse thudded in my ears, and I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. I stood, leaving the untouched mug on the table. "You should have asked," I said. Vera's voice followed me as I walked away. "If we asked, you'd just say no. Sometimes it's easier to do what needs to be done." That afternoon, I went for a walk to clear my head, but my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, Next Gen Legacy. It was a forward, accidental, probably, from Vera's work account. Inside, the message read, "We'll prioritize Alohan. Giselle's not our investment focus." I stopped walking. The words swam on the screen. Investment focus. I wasn't even a person in her world anymore. I was a column in a spreadsheet. Useful when needed. Forgotten when spent. I walked back home slowly, the sky overcast, heavy with the promise of rain. Inside, Alohan sat at the kitchen counter, talking on the phone, voice dripping sugar. I told them, my parents believe in me. They do anything for my dream. She glanced up at me, smiled sweetly, and turned away. Later that night, I opened the folder I had created days earlier, reclaimed Do Not Touch. I scanned the mortgage papers, adding them to the growing list of evidence. My name was there in black ink, the signature a near-perfect imitation of my handwriting. The next morning, I confronted my mother again. "You forged legal documents," I said, holding the printout. She didn't flinch. "Stop using words you don't understand." "I understand enough to know this is fraud." Her tone sharpened. "Don't throw around accusations. You sound ridiculous." Then explain it. She folded her arms. You've always been ungrateful. We're building something for the family. I'm sorry if you can't see that. Aloan entered mid-conversation, her robe wrapped around her like armor. Mom, can you help me pick an outfit for the photo shoot later? Vera smiled instantly, her anger dissolving. Of course, darling. She brushed past me, her perfume lingering like a taunt. I stood alone in the kitchen, the papers trembling slightly in my hands. It wasn't just about who they loved more. It was about who they thought could be used without consequence. I wasn't invisible to them, I was convenient. I went to my desk, pulled out the small printer I'd kept from college, and started scanning everything, the mortgage, the bank inquiry, even the email header. The pages slid out one by one, the printer's quiet hum almost soothing. Each piece of paper felt like a small reclaiming of space. By midnight, I had a stack of documents and a folder on my desktop named fraud_proof_v1. I stared at it for a while, my fingers hovering over the mouse. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been before. What I felt now was something cleaner, sharper, clarity. When I closed the computer, I whispered into the dark, they think I'll stay quiet. They don't know me at all. The room felt cold, but my thoughts were steady. Slowly, gently, I realized what needed to happen next. 3 weeks later, I sat alone at a networking dinner I hadn't wanted to attend. The restaurant buzzed with polite laughter, the kind that fills space but means nothing. My business card sat untouched beside my plate. I was here because Maura had insisted it would be good for me to meet people outside the family. I didn't know that outside would come to mean so much in one evening. The host led me to a table already half full. My stomach tightened when I saw her, Aloan, sitting under the soft light of a chandelier, gold bracelet flashing each time she gestured. Beside her, a man in a tailored suit leaned close, clearly smitten. For a moment, I thought she might pretend not to see me, but then her eyes met mine. Surprise flickered for half a second, replaced quickly by a bright, public smile. "Oh my God, Giselle," she said, standing just enough for the attention to shift our way. "What a coincidence. Everyone, this is my sister. She's the creative one." The word stung, coated with the kind of sugar that rots from the inside. I smiled back and sat down, careful to keep my tone even. "Nice to meet you all." Dinner rolled on with practiced small talk. The waiter poured wine, glasses clinked. Aloan's boyfriend, his name was Eric, dominated the table conversation. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. At one point, he leaned toward me, wine glass half raised. "It's wild how much you've done for your sister. She told me you helped with the down payment on the lake house. That's family loyalty right there." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "She said that?" "Sure did," he replied, oblivious. "Said you were the backbone of the family. I told her not every sibling would do something like that." Aloan's laugh came too quickly. "Eric exaggerates. You know how he is." I studied her face. The faint pink creeping up her neck, the way her hands tightened around the stem of her glass, she knew what she'd said, and she knew I knew. The rest of the table drifted into another conversation, but between us, the air had gone still. I ate quietly, slowly, listening to my heartbeat instead of the chatter. Each bite tasted like metal. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself early. Outside, the night smelled of rain and car exhaust. I waited by my car until I saw her step out, heels clicking against the pavement. "Why did you tell him that?" I asked. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. "Tell him what?" "That I helped with the down payment." Aloan sighed, soft and dismissive. "It's not a big deal. We just needed a little extra to get approved. It was temporary, Giselle. We meant to fix it later. You used my account." Her tone shifted, more defensive now. "Mom said it was fine. We were all going to benefit. I don't know why you're making it sound like a crime." "Because it is." She rolled her eyes. "You've always had this martyr complex. It's exhausting." I took a step closer. "The next time you touch anything with my name on it, I'll let the police handle it. No warnings. No conversations. Just action." For once, she didn't have a comeback. The color drained from her face, and for the first time since we were children, she looked afraid of me. Not because I was angry, but because she finally realized I meant every word. She broke the silence with a shaky laugh. "You wouldn't do that. You're not that type of person." You don't know what type of person I am anymore. The rain started, light at first, tapping against the hoods of cars. She pulled her jacket tighter and muttered, "You're being ridiculous." Then she turned and hurried away, her heels splashing through shallow puddles. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. My phone vibrated on the seat beside me. A text from Vera. "Let it go. You're escalating for no reason. This is still family." Family. That word again, bent and stretched until it meant obedience. I stared at the message, the glow of the screen lighting the small space around me. Then I took a screenshot, saving it to a folder labeled evidence. The timestamp blinked back at me like a quiet promise. When I got home, the house was dark. I poured a glass of water, set it on the counter, and stood there until the refrigerator hummed on again. My mind replayed her face, the forced calm, the trained guilt, the practiced innocence. I wasn't angry. I was past anger. What I felt now was resolve, pure and steady. I opened the drawer where I kept important papers and pulled out the small metal safe I'd bought years ago. It was heavy, its corners dented from the last move. Inside were the printed mortgage documents, the fake signature, the email threads, all stacked neatly. I placed the phone screenshot on top, smoothing it flat with my palm. They had always believed my silence was compliance. That was their mistake. The next morning, Vera called. Her tone was cool, managerial. "I heard you made a scene last night." I asked a question. "You embarrassed your sister in public. People talk. Then let them. You think this helps anyone? We're a family, Giselle. You don't drag family through the mud." "You already did that," I said softly. "I'm just standing where you left me." She sighed into the phone, the sound of someone who still believed control equaled love. "You're making me choose sides I don't want to choose." "You already did." There was a long pause, and then the click of the call ending. I looked at the phone, half expecting another message, another attempt to guilt me into silence. None came. That evening, I sat by the window with my laptop open. The city lights shimmered outside, blurring through the glass as the rain returned. I renamed the file that held every piece of proof I'd collected, evidence_layer2_trustbreach.jpg. Each word felt deliberate, clean, final. I leaned back, the chair creaking softly beneath me. For the first time in months, I felt the quiet settle not as emptiness, but as peace. They finally knew where my line was, and that I was done letting them cross it. That night, I slept without waking once. By the time summer began, I had memorized the rhythm of my apartment, the buzz of the streetlight outside my window, the faint hum of traffic 3 floors below. Silence no longer frightened me. It had become a companion, steady and honest, unlike the voices that used to fill my life with polite lies. That morning, I took the train downtown. The city smelled faintly of rain and exhaust, the kind of air that carried secrets. My palms were damp as I gripped the leather folder on my lap. Inside was everything: bank statements, forged documents, screenshots, the proof that what my family called support had been theft. The law office was small, tucked between a florist and a dry cleaner. The receptionist smiled kindly. "Ms. Wynn? He's expecting you." Inside, the attorney's office smelled of paper and old wood polish. He looked over his glasses as I entered. "You're here about a family matter?" I nodded, placing the folder on the table. Fraudulent signature. Unauthorized use of my social security number. Multiple credit pulls I didn't make. He flipped through the papers quietly. "That's quite a file." "I've had time," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. After a few moments, he looked up. "You understand that once we file, there's no taking it back. This will get ugly." I smiled faintly. "It's been ugly for a long time. I'm just making it official." He nodded. "All right, Ms. Wynn. Let's start with a letter of intent." There was something soothing about watching him type. Each click of the keyboard felt like a small step toward reclaiming air I didn't know I'd been holding back. When I left the office, the city noise felt sharper, cleaner. The folder was lighter in my hands, though the weight of what came next pressed hard against my chest. 2 days later, Vera received the email. The notice of action. I knew because she called my father within minutes. She didn't call me. At dinner that evening, I imagined she poured herself a glass of wine, the same one she reserved for difficult days. Her hands probably trembled, just slightly. I pictured her forwarding the message to Calder with one word in the subject line: handle. He did. The call came that night. Giselle, he began, his voice tired, the sound of someone who still believed calm could fix anything. What's this about? A lawsuit? It's not a lawsuit yet, I said. It's a request for accountability. He sighed. You're better than this. You'll ruin your mother. She ruined me first, I said, my tone soft, measured. I'm just correcting the record. Your sister had nothing to do with this. She's benefiting from it. That's enough. He exhaled heavily. You can't take family to court. People don't do that. People also don't sign their daughter's name on loans and call it love. There was silence on the line, long and hollow. You've changed, he said finally. I've stopped apologizing, I replied, and hung up. The next morning, my attorney called. You were right to come forward, he said. We found several unauthorized pulls on your credit. Total exposure, $80,000. All linked to accounts your mother opened in connection with your sister's expenses. 80,000. The number sounded unreal. Can we press charges? I asked. We can, he said carefully. But I'd recommend starting with civil action. It will send the message clearly enough. Not yet, I said after a pause. Let them sweat first. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my old college journal, flipping through pages filled with sketches of logos, scribbled ideas for a creative agency I once dreamed of building. The handwriting was hopeful, rounder. Back then, I believed effort and integrity were enough. They didn't kill my dreams, I whispered to the empty room. They just renamed them without asking. A soft knock came at my door the following evening. I checked the peephole. Vera. Of course. She stood there like she was arriving for a luncheon, hair done, blazer pressed, lipstick perfect. Even now, she wanted to look like she was in control. When I opened the door, her eyes flicked past me, scanning my apartment as though inspecting a hotel room she might leave a bad review for. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. You already let yourself into everything else. Why stop now? She ignored the jab, setting her purse on the counter. We're family, Giselle. Let's solve this like family. I walked to the kitchen table and pointed. On it sat a manila envelope labeled filed unless paid in full. Next to it, a printed spreadsheet, every false transaction, every forged signature, neatly itemized. Her face shifted, just slightly, the first crack in her carefully arranged calm. What is this? Documentation. You wanted transparency, right? Here it is. She picked up the envelope. You do this to your own mother? You did this to yourself, I said. You forged my name. Now you get to live with yours. Her hand trembled. Do you have any idea what people will say? They'll say the truth, I answered softly. Calder's heart can't take this kind of stress. Neither could mine, I said. But I survived it. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, as if trying to locate the obedient daughter she used to control. When she couldn't find her, she reached for the only weapon she had left, pity. I did what I thought was best, she said quietly. For this family. You mean for Aloan? Her lips pressed together. You've always resented her success. I shook my head. No. I resented your belief that her success required my sacrifice. She looked away, blinking hard. You've become cruel. I've become clear, I said. The conversation ended there. She took the envelope and left without another word. The click of the door closing behind her echoed through the apartment. I stood still for a long time, my heart beat loud in the quiet. There was no triumph in the moment, no cinematic swell of victory. Just relief, soft, heavy, complete. Later, I sat by the window again, the city glowing outside like a map of possibilities I hadn't let myself imagine before. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I reached for my pen and wrote a single line in my journal. I don't owe them silence. The words looked different on paper, firm, settled, like they had been waiting years to exist. Gently, I closed the book, exhaling the tension that had lived inside me too long. The storm started before the rain. I could feel it hours earlier, pressure building, the air too thick to breathe right. By the time the first drops hit my windows, the sky had already bruised purple. I sat on the couch, a mug of tea going cold in my hands, staring at my phone lighting up across the room. One new voicemail. For a minute, I didn't move. My name glowed on the screen like a small dare. I pressed play and set the phone on the table. My Aunt Lorna's voice crackled through the speaker, shaky and low. You should know what your mother said the year you were born. The rain quickened against the glass. Her words came in bursts between shallow breaths. I remember because she told me right after you came home from the hospital. She said, only one of them will shine, Lorna. Aloan is our shot. She laughed when she said it, but it didn't sound like a joke. I thought she was tired. I didn't know what she meant until years later. My throat closed. The mug trembled in my grip. I turned up the volume, needing to hear it again, needing to make sure I hadn't imagined the words. Lorna continued, her voice cracking on the edges. I should have said something earlier, sweetheart. But your mother, she made sure no one questioned her. She said you were the strong one, that you didn't need the same things Aloan did. She said you'd understand. Understand. That word again, used by people who never intended to explain anything. I let the voicemail play to the end, the silence that followed louder than her apology. My eyes drifted toward the small jewelry box on my dresser, the one that once held the necklace I never received. I remembered my 10th birthday. The cake, the candles, the photo of Aloan smiling wide with the gold chain glinting against her neck. You'll get yours when you're older, Mom had said, sliding a stack of second-hand books toward me instead. These will last longer than jewelry. They didn't. They just taught me how to read the lies between words. The phone buzzed again, another voicemail. The number was familiar. Dad. For a moment, I almost didn't play it. But curiosity can sound like forgiveness if you're tired enough. His voice came through slow, slurred, like someone talking to ghosts. I tried to stop her from taking that money. I should have protected you. I'm sorry, baby. I froze. I rewound the message and listened again, then again. It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the proof that he knew. He knew and stayed silent. I stared at the raindrops crawling down the glass, their paths blurring together until I couldn't tell one from another. I didn't call him back. I didn't delete the message either. Instead, I printed both voicemails, Lorna's and his, and taped them side by side inside my journal. Above them, I wrote in neat, steady letters, truth confirmed, bloodlines lie. It wasn't bitterness anymore. It was record-keeping. The next day, Maura texted me, you should check Reddit. I frowned, opened the link. A screenshot filled the screen, Vera Halden, my mother, applying for a community grant under Aloan's failed business. The comments were ruthless. Isn't this fraud? Didn't that business shut down? Typical small-town politics, people like her never face consequences. I scrolled through them all, my heart oddly calm. The words didn't sting the way they should have. They just confirmed what I already knew, truth eventually finds its own audience. A notification popped up. A message from Maura again. Are you okay? I typed, I'm fine. Then paused. Actually, I'm calm. Maybe that's worse. The rain finally stopped that evening, leaving the streets slick and silver. I opened my window, breathing in the smell of wet asphalt. Somewhere below, a dog barked. A car door slammed. Ordinary sounds in an extraordinary silence. Inside, the hum of the refrigerator filled the gaps where family used to be. I reached for my pen and wrote, they always feared I'd tell the truth. What they didn't expect was how calm I'd sound when I did. It felt strange, realizing calm could be sharper than rage. The following morning, I uploaded the voice recordings, the documents, the screenshots, the whole paper trail, to a cloud folder labeled legacyaudit_final.mp4. I added a caption, this was never about revenge. Just record keeping. Before hitting share, I hesitated. Not because of fear, but because of what it meant to finally stop waiting for anyone else to do the right thing. I clicked the button. The upload bar crawled forward, a slow, quiet heartbeat in digital form. By evening, messages started trickling in. Old family friends. Former neighbors. We had no idea. Is this real? How could she? I didn't respond to any of them. Silence spoke better than I ever could. Later that night, I made tea and sat by the window again. The storm clouds had cleared, but the air still smelled of thunder. I replayed Lorna's voicemail one last time. Her voice sounded smaller now, almost like a confession whispered through decades of guilt. I closed my eyes and remembered the small things, the gold necklace glinting under the party lights, Dad's hand resting heavy on my shoulder, Mom's voice saying, be proud of your sister. Pride had always been the price of peace in our family. I thought about calling my father, telling him that silence wasn't the same as love, that pretending not to see a wound doesn't stop it from bleeding. But I didn't. He had chosen his version of peace. I was learning mine. I stood, walked to my desk, and began writing again. Every word came easier now. The story no longer felt like something happening to me, it was something I was authoring, one fact at a time. Healing didn't mean forgiving. It meant refusing to carry what wasn't mine anymore. When I turned off the lights, the apartment glowed faintly from the street outside. The uploaded file sat safely in the cloud, timestamped and verified. The truth no longer needed my permission to exist. The afternoon light stretched long across my living room floor, thin and gold, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it is. I sat at my desk finishing an email when the intercom buzzed. One short tone, hesitant, like whoever pressed the button wasn't sure they should. I didn't need to check the camera. I already knew who it was. They always came when the sky was about to turn. For 12 p.m. on the dot. I stood, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. Vera was first in line, face painted with the same careful confidence she wore at every PDA meeting and church fundraiser. Calder stood slightly behind her, shoulders rounded, tie askew. And Aloan, of course she came, looked smaller than I remembered, though maybe it was the weight of whatever script she'd rehearsed on the drive here. "Can we come in?" Vera asked, clutching her purse like it contained the last pieces of her dignity. I didn't move aside out of kindness, I moved because I wanted the battlefield on my territory. "Sure," I said. "Wipe your shoes. The floor's new." They entered cautiously, eyes scanning the apartment as if measuring how well I'd done without them. Vera's gaze lingered on the framed certificates above my bookshelf, the neat stacks of paper on the table. "Nice place," Calder murmured. "It's mine," I said. The silence that followed was heavy, awkward. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Calder cleared his throat. "We thought maybe you could help us. Just this once." "Help." That word again. I gestured toward the dining table. "Sit." They did. I stayed standing. On the table, neatly arranged like exhibits in a courtroom, were the things they'd buried and I'd unearthed, the mortgage papers with my forged signature, the screenshots of stolen accounts, the transcript of Calder's late-night apology, the comment threads from Vera's fraudulent grant, and, placed dead center, the card from graduation, "You're strong, honey." Aloan's eyes darted across the table, landing on each item like they were live wires. Vera reached for the card, then stopped herself. "I assume you've been busy," she said, her voice a shade too calm. "I've had time." Vera folded her hands. None of this was malicious. We believed in Aloan's future. "Belief doesn't require theft," I said quietly. "Or erasure." Aloan finally spoke, her tone soft, almost pleading. "We're still sisters, Giselle. Don't do this." "You needed a sister," I said. "You created a servant." The words hung there, sharp enough to cut. Calder rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes watery, the first sign of life in months of silence. "You were the best thing this family had," he said, voice breaking. "And we buried it." I nodded slowly. "No victory, just recognition." "Yes," I said. "You did." Vera looked at him sharply, as if betrayal could still be redirected. "Don't feed into this," she hissed. Then, turning to me, "You've always been dramatic. This crusade, it's unnecessary. We can fix this quietly." "You mean hide it quietly," I said. Her composure cracked for the first time. "You're destroying everything I built. You built it on my name." Calder reached for her arm, trying to calm her. "Vera, stop." But she couldn't. "You think you're better than us now? Sitting here in your little apartment, acting like you're some moral authority. You're ungrateful." "Grateful for what?" I asked. "Being used? Being invisible?" Her voice rose, brittle and thin. "We did what we had to do for this family. You'd understand if you ever had children." Something in me stilled. The accusation landed, but not the way she meant it. "I don't need children to know right from wrong," I said softly. "And I don't need you to tell me what love looks like anymore." I reached under the table, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it toward her. "You'll find everything there, itemized repayments, legal waivers, notice of pending complaint. I'm not asking for an apology. Just what's owed." Vera stared at it as though it might bite. "This isn't you," she whispered. "It's always been me," I said. "You just never met this version." Aloan leaned forward, voice trembling. Please, Giselle. You're making a mistake. I looked at her, the same sister who once promised to share secrets, then shared my ideas instead. No, Aloan, I said, my tone gentle but certain. I'm correcting one. Calder stood suddenly, pacing near the window. She's right, Vera, he said quietly. We crossed a line. Vera turned on him, eyes wide. After everything I've done for this family, you choose her? He looked down. I'm choosing what's left of my conscience. For a moment, everything froze. The air felt thick with years of unspoken words. I could almost hear the hum of my heartbeat matching the refrigerator's steady buzz. This isn't revenge, I said finally. It's a receipt. Vera pressed a hand to her chest as though steadying herself. You'll regret this. Blood is thicker than contracts, I interrupted. Yes, I've heard. But ink lasts longer. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I opened the door, the gesture deliberate and calm. Leave before you make me the villain you fear I'll become. Aloan stood first. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She stepped past me, whispering, I never wanted this. Yes, you did, I said softly. You just didn't expect consequences. Calder followed her out, pausing in the doorway. I'm sorry, Giselle, he murmured. I know, I said. But you should have been sorry when it mattered. Vera was last to move. She lingered, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. I hope you're happy, she said bitterly. I'm free, I replied. Happiness is optional. The door shut behind them with a quiet finality that no courtroom gavel could match. I stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle into the space they'd polluted for too long. My hands trembled, not from fear, but release. When I leaned against the door, my knees nearly gave out. I exhaled slowly, the air escaping like years of held breath. For the first time in 18 months, I didn't feel cornered. I felt clean. I walked to the table, gathered the documents, and placed them in a single folder marked resolved. Then I turned off the lights. Outside, the city pulsed with distant noise, horns, laughter, life continuing as it always had. Inside, there was only stillness, deep and earned. They came to reclaim a legacy. I gave them a bill. The door hadn't knocked in days. I noticed it the way you notice when pain has finally faded, gradually, then suddenly. I stopped checking the peephole every time the elevator chimed. I no longer jumped when the mail slot clinked shut. Peace arrived not like a declaration, but like sunlight easing through blinds after a long storm. My orchid was blooming. Just one small flower, pink at the edges, stubborn in its survival. I watered it slowly, quietly, letting the soil drink what it needed. 2 weeks had passed since I handed Vera that envelope. Since Aloan's voice cracked when I said no. Since Calder finally looked at me and saw what he'd chosen to ignore. There was no apology. No voicemail. No sudden change of heart. And I didn't need one. That morning, I walked to the library cafe to meet Maura. We sat outside, under the rustling shade of a wide elm tree, our coffees warm between our palms. The air smelled of cinnamon and old books, a scent that had once meant safety. I saw the news, Maura said, sliding a folded newspaper across the table. The headline read, "Non-profit under audit after grant irregularities, Director Halden declines comment." I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either. I just nodded. "Are you okay?" she asked. I stirred my coffee. "I'm not angry anymore." Maura raised an eyebrow. "So, you won?" I thought about that for a moment. The files. The nights I couldn't sleep. The years I spent waiting to be chosen. "No," I said. "I just walked away with everything they couldn't take." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything. The kind that feels earned. When I got home that afternoon, a plain envelope waited by my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a card. 3 sentences, handwritten in familiar, slanted script. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would end this way. I hope one day you'll understand." There was no signature, but I knew the handwriting. Aloan. I read it once, then again. And then I put it back in the envelope, tucked it between 2 books on a shelf I rarely touched. Not out of spite, but because some things no longer needed to be opened again. Later that evening, I took the long way home from the grocery store, walking past the park and down to the lake. The air was cool, brushed with early fall. A little girl stood at the edge of the water, tossing breadcrumbs to the ducks. Her mother stood behind her, hands in her coat pockets. "You're strong, honey," the woman said, gently. The words wrapped around me, soft and strange. I stopped walking. Not because I needed to. Just because I wanted to. I let the air fill my lungs, slowly, like it had all the time in the world. There was no weight pressing against my chest anymore. No silence I had to break through. Only breath. Only sky. When I got back to the apartment, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the file I had labeled resolved. I added one more folder beside it. This one, marked simply, closed. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I placed it gently in the drawer and slid it shut. Forgiveness isn't a currency. It's not something you owe or earn. Sometimes silence is the only truce you get. And that's enough. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Not every story ends with forgiveness. Some end with boundaries that should have been there all along. So tell me, have you ever been the one they erased? Until they needed something? Drop your story in the comments. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe for more stories that speak the truth they never expected us to tell.